Imagine standing 66 million years ago. In front of you, tsunamis tower higher than mountains. Blistering heatwaves roar through the air, deafening your ears. Catastrophe is everywhere. You could vaporize in a second upon contact. This is the terrifying nightmare that erased the ruling empire of Earth that had lasted for 165 million years. More than 66 million years ago, Earth was a completely different world. There were no human footprints, no vehicles, no cities, no artificial lights. Instead, endless stretches of primordial forests blanketed the continents, and the planet's true rulers roamed freely, the dinosaurs. From Tyrannosaurus rex, the ultimate predator with bone-crushing jaws, to massive herds of triceratops marching like living tanks, and towering titanosaurs stretching their long necks toward the highest treetops. Dinosaurs had evolved to dominate nearly every terrestrial niche. Let the number 165 million years sink in for a moment. All of human civilization, from our earliest cities to the modern space age, has unfolded over a mere 10,000 years. Compared to the reign of the dinosaurs, our history is nothing more than a fleeting blink. These creatures weren't just dominant, they were Earth, reigning over the biosphere for a span of time so vast it's hard for the human mind to fully comprehend. They represented the pinnacle of life, icons of power and evolutionary success. But as with every grand dynasty, even the greatest can be the most fragile, and something unimaginable was quietly making its way toward our planet from the farthest edges of the solar system. An era was about to end, not through war, not through decline, but from a collision out of the sky. Picture this fateful visitor, not a mere cosmic pebble, but a titanic rock estimated to be 10 to 15 kilometers in diameter. Yes, you heard that right, something as large as a mountain, looming in space. A solitary wanderer from the distant asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, likely nudged off its stable orbit by some gravitational disturbance millions of years earlier, had begun a long, lonely descent toward Earth. It hurtled toward us like a cosmic missile, at an almost incomprehensible speed of 20 kilometers per second. That's over 70,000 kilometers per hour. For comparison, that's tens of times faster than the fastest bullet ever fired by human hands. With that size and velocity, it didn't just carry mass, it carried catastrophic kinetic energy. As it tore through Earth's protective atmosphere, the immense friction transformed it into a blinding fireball. In those final seconds, for any creature looking up from the surface, it would have appeared as a swelling, apocalyptic sun streaking across the sky, growing larger by the second, until it consumed the heavens. Its supersonic roar likely drowned out every other sound on the planet in that moment. Studies suggest the asteroid struck Earth at a steep angle, somewhere between 45 and 60 degrees, maximizing its destructive force. Its target, a shallow ancient sea near today's Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. The region was rich in gypsum, a sulfur-bearing mineral that would play a crucial role in amplifying the after-effects of the impact. There was no explosion in the cinematic sense. This was instantaneous annihilation on a scale beyond comprehension. The ground was literally torn open, leaving behind a crater nearly 200 kilometers wide. Scientists estimate the energy released was equivalent to at least 10 billion Hiroshima-sized atomic bombs. To put that in perspective, the combined power of every nuclear weapon ever built by humanity wouldn't come close. It would be like comparing a matchstick to a supernova. At the very moment of impact, an intense thermal pulse hotter than the surface of the sun erupted from ground zero at the speed of light. Anything within hundreds of kilometers was instantly bathed in an unimaginably powerful wave of radiant heat. Picture the lush coastal rainforests of what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. 1 second, they were vibrant ecosystems teeming with life. The next, they were reduced to ash in a flash, igniting and vaporizing almost instantaneously. And the dinosaurs? They didn't even have time to understand what was happening. In an instant, they were vaporized, turned into steam and dust, before their brains could even register a sense of fear. There were no prolonged screams, no drawn-out agony, just absolute, instantaneous annihilation. Next came the shockwave. Ancient trees, massive and centuries old, were snapped like twigs. Boulders the size of houses were hurled into the air like pebbles. For the dinosaurs caught within this kill zone, the pressure wave was as deadly as the heat. The sheer force would have crushed their bodies from the inside out. Lungs bursting, internal organs destroyed. Others were simply thrown kilometers through the air, slamming into rock, vegetation, or each other with lethal force. It was likely the most primal terror imaginable, to be overwhelmed by an invisible power they couldn't fight or comprehend. There was no mercy here. From the smallest raptor to the colossal Alamosaurus, every creature within that radius shared the same brutal fate. No distinction, no escape, they were all swept away in the initial vortex of destruction. Within a few short seconds to minutes after impact, life on land within several hundred kilometers of the Chicxulub crater had been utterly wiped out. Every instinct, every survival mechanism hardwired into those creatures over millions of years, snuffed out as swiftly as their lives. But this was only the beginning. The true catastrophe was still unfolding. The impact tore through Earth's crust. Trillions of tons of rock, soil, and pulverized, molten asteroid debris were blasted into the sky, so high, they soared beyond the stratosphere. And then, the cold, inescapable pull of gravity brought them back down. But they didn't fall gently. They came crashing down as a global rain of fire. Imagine this, not a hailstorm, but a downpour of trillions upon trillions of molten glass beads, known as spherules. As they hurtled through the atmosphere at tremendous speeds, friction reheated them to temperatures of hundreds, sometimes thousands of degrees Celsius. The entire atmosphere transformed into a giant microwave oven. The sky, once blue, turned into a searing orange-red blaze. For dinosaurs thousands of kilometers from ground zero, those that survived the initial blinding flash and felt only a distant tremor, this was when true terror arrived. They looked up at the sky, bewildered. Confusion quickly gave way to searing pain. Massive herbivores like hadrosaurs grazing the plains of North America, or titanosaurs roaming the forests of South America, became walking targets. They too large to hide. Their skin began to blister and burn. Their screams echoed across the land, but it was all in vain. They tried to flee in desperation, only to be burned alive beneath a blazing sky. And it didn't stop there. The immense energy released from the impact triggered planet-wide seismic waves, earthquakes stronger than anything life on Earth had ever experienced. The entire planet shook to its core. For the dinosaurs, the solid ground beneath their feet suddenly turned traitorous. They stumbled, lost balance, especially the massive bipeds or towering quadrupeds. In mountainous regions, these earthquakes unleashed devastating landslides. Some dinosaurs, seeking shelter from the firestorm, may have fled into valleys or taken cover by cliffs, only to be buried alive by millions of tons of falling rock and soil. Their final, panicked roars were drowned in the thunder of collapsing Earth. Now, the survivors were trapped between two fronts, a fiery sky above and a collapsing Earth below. The confusion of earlier had given way to pure terror and despair. Their powerful survival instinct screamed for an escape, but there was none. They were caught in a full-scale planetary assault. And the nightmare still wasn't over. The catastrophic impact at Chicxulub would strike at the oceans and the plants that sustained life next. First came the Great Deluge from the sea. Because the impact occurred in shallow coastal waters, it triggered a sudden depression and displacement of the ocean floor. The result, the birth of megatsunamis, waves larger than anything our planet has ever recorded. Forget the 30-meter tsunamis we know today. Near the Gulf of Mexico, the first waves may have reached 300 meters high, or even more. Imagine a moving wall of water taller than a 72-story skyscraper, racing inland at hundreds of kilometers per hour. Its force was enough to obliterate anything in its path. For dinosaurs living along coastlines or lowland plains, the first sign might have been a strange retreat of the sea, exposing bare seabeds. Curiosity turned to panic as a colossal wall of water appeared on the horizon, rushing toward them at breakneck speed. The roar of the tsunami drowned out everything, even their terrified cries. On the flat, open land, there was nowhere to run. They were swept away, slammed into trees and rocks carried by the wave. Many drowned instantly. Even massive marine reptiles like Mosasaurus in the shallow sea stood little chance against such violent chaos and destruction. But the threat wasn't limited to the coasts. Back on land, the intense heat from billions of falling spherules did something even worse. It ignited wildfires across entire continents. These individual fires eventually merged into planet-wide firestorms, consuming oxygen and spreading with terrifying speed. Millions of square kilometers of forests and grasslands transformed into a true sea of flames, a global crematorium. Dinosaurs deep inland, who may have initially found refuge from the firestorm and quakes, now faced a new, inescapable enemy. They were surrounded by walls of flame that stretched into the sky. The air temperature skyrocketed, becoming unendurable. Panic drove them to flee, but every direction led to fire. The firestorms released massive clouds of toxic smoke. The atmosphere thickened with soot and ash, becoming unbreathable. Many dinosaurs were trapped in this suffocating haze. Disoriented, gasping, they collapsed, dying not from flames, but from smoke and heat. Within just a few hours to days, Earth had become a planetary hellscape. The empire of the dinosaurs had been pushed to the brink of extinction. After everything, perhaps the most terrifying blow of all came not with fire or fury, but with the absence of sunlight. Millions, even billions of tons of ash and, more importantly, fine sulfate aerosols were launched high into the stratosphere. There, they formed a thick, global shroud that blocked out precious sunlight. The result was what scientists call an impact winter. Earth was plunged into a prolonged darkness that lasted for months, perhaps even years. The dim, filtered sunlight that did reach the surface was too weak to warm the planet or to power photosynthesis, the very foundation of the food chain. Global temperatures plummeted, dropping by tens of degrees Celsius, even in the warm equatorial zones. Icy winds swept across a world stripped bare and eerily silent. For the dinosaurs that had survived everything up to this point, this was a different kind of shock. The skies grew cold and ominous. The panic and chaos of the impact gave way to a deeper dread, a quiet, creeping fear. As the chill seeped into their bones, they could do little more than huddle together for warmth, confused and helpless. But it didn't stop there. Then came the tears of the sky. Massive amounts of sulfur and nitrogen compounds released into the atmosphere, combined with moisture to produce highly acidic rainfall, concentrated sulfuric and nitric acid. This toxic rain poured down across the globe, poisoning surface water and, more devastatingly, destroying what little vegetation had managed to survive until now. And that marked the true collapse of the food chain. Without sunlight, the plants died, leading to mass starvation among herbivorous dinosaurs. From the great herds of hadrosaurs to smaller species like pachycephaloses, they wandered the dying landscape, desperately searching for food. Their enormous bodies required vast amounts of energy, and when that energy source vanished, they quickly withered and fell. For predators like Tyrannosaurus rex, the mass die-off of herbivores may have offered a temporary feast of carrion. For a while, they could survive by scavenging, but when the last bodies were either consumed or rotted away, the hunters faced a new kind of desperation. They turned on each other, competing violently. They attacked anything that moved, driven by hunger into brutality. Some species may have tried to migrate in search of food, only to find that every place was just as barren. They may have lasted a little longer, but as the bitter winter dragged on for years, and as the entire ecosystem unraveled from its roots, even the most resilient could not escape the same grim fate. Food ran out, the cold sapped their strength, disease spread among weakened bodies. This was no longer a sudden catastrophe. It became a drawn-out extinction, wiping clean the last remnants of the once glorious empire of the dinosaurs. It's estimated that around 75% of all species on Earth were wiped out. The dominant rulers of the land for 165 million years had vanished entirely. In the oceans, colossal marine reptiles like Mosasaurus and Plesiosaurs, along with countless other species such as ammonites, were lost to time. It was a brutal biological purge, a mass extinction of unprecedented scale. And yet, amid the ashes, life found a way, as it always does. It wasn't the giants who survived, but the small, unassuming creatures, those weighing less than 25 kilograms. Once background characters in the story of the Cretaceous, they now stepped into the spotlight. These were the early mammals, with flexible diets and high adaptability, and the ancient birds that would eventually evolve into the species we know today. Beneath the water's surface, crocodiles and turtles endured, protected by thick shells and armored skin. They took shelter in the depths. As cold-blooded animals, they required far less energy, allowing them to survive extended periods without food. The tragic end of the dinosaur empire was, in truth, the dawn of a new age. From these few survivors, life began once more to diversify and expand, giving rise to the vibrant, complex world we know today. And yet, few can truly forget the sheer majesty and grandeur of the dinosaurs. They remain an immortal legend in the chronicles of our planet, a testament to both the power of nature and the fragility of life. Which begs the question, if humanity were to face a Chicxulub-scale asteroid today, would we be able to outrun extinction?